All right, option number 3. Option number 3, again, just like with option number 2, I had to cut out a triangle that was the same size as one of the triangles on my final piece of paper. All right. Some advantages to option number 3 are that only half of the spaces do you need to trace. The other half, you're just going to be scribbling, kind of like we did in option number 1. All right. It doesn't require a window, so that's an advantage. And it's similar to how we would use tracing paper. So if you've ever wondered how tracing paper would work, I'm kind of doing something similar to that. Disadvantages of doing this, you do have to trace a couple times. You do have to remember to flip, just like in option 2. You have to flip the triangle in the right direction. And not all sections will be as light as each other, or as dark as each other. Kind of like option number 1, right? Each of these options have their benefits, their advantages, their disadvantages. Sometimes you're making a work of art and only one of these options is really going to work for you. So knowing the multiple options, even if you kind of ignore them for this project and you just choose the one, consider these for other future projects. Okay? So I've made my design here. My design is just kind of a, I don't know, abstract kind of tree here. Just like in option 2, I put 3 closed circles and I put 3 open circles. This is the center. This is the part that's going to be the center of my design here. I got a little bit more detailed in this one because I know I only have to trace it a couple times compared to what I did in option number 2. So I got a little bit more detailed here. So the first thing is I want to make sure that this is really nice and dark, just like we did for option number 1. It has to be in pencil though. So just like option number 1 has to be pencil. I can't go back over it with Sharpie or marker like I did for option number 2. So I'm going to take my pencil and I'm going to start darkening over all of these lines to make sure they're nice and crisp. All right, that was exhausting. Okay, so I've got it colored it really, really dark. I have lots of dark pencil lines on it. I'm going to take my piece of paper that I know the triangles each match the size of this triangle exactly. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this over. So this is the pencil side. This other side doesn't have anything on it, though you can kind of see the design through it. So I'm going to take my paper and I'm going to flip my design so that the pencil is against one of the triangles of my piece. Okay, so I'm going to line it up exactly where I want it to go. All right, it's important that I hold this down, that I don't let this wiggle. If it helps you to tape it lightly to the paper in a couple spots, that's okay. But you don't want it to shift because then your design is going to shift and you're probably going to have to start all from scratch again. Now, I can use pencil, actual lead, which is what I'm going to do because it's going to make a couple other sections easier for me, okay? So I'm going to scribble. I'm going to scribble wherever I can see my lines through. You may not be able to see them on the cameras, but I can see the tree that I drew through the paper because I colored so darkly. All right, I'm going to scribble hard wherever I see those pencil marks. I'm not tracing. I don't want to put in that extra work to try to really trace. All I want to do is use the pencil lead to act as hard pressure against wherever I drew. So it's going to kind of look like a messier, scribblier version, but I do want to make sure I'm really on top of any of those lines that I drew. So if you need to scribble a little bit more just to make sure that you've gone over them, that's perfectly fine. So I'm moving my hands around occasionally to get into different areas, but I'm always making sure there's firm pressure. I'm pushing down pretty darn hard here so that it's transferring and it's not slipping. All right, I think I did it all, but before I lift it off, I'm going to check different corners. So I'm going to hold down with one hand and I'm going to lift up corners to make sure that I scribbled everywhere that I needed. I noticed that I didn't do a very good job right here, so I'm going to scribble over that. Okay, what am I missing? Okay, that's better. All right, that half looks good. So now I'm going to put pressure on this half and I'm going to lift up here. That looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. So now I can take this off, okay? You'll notice that this side still has the pencil on it, the pencil line that I originally drew, whereas the side here kind of looks like a meshy version. You can see some areas where I went over a little bit darker. I want it to look messier here because that means there's plenty of graphite for a couple of the sections that I'm going to do in a minute. If I didn't scribble enough and I just traced again, it's going to make it harder and you're not necessarily going to be transferring all of the image. Some parts might get left out occasionally, okay? So it's important that you kind of scribbled and made all of those lines basically thicker than they were. You can see I still went very hard and dark when I was doing the scribbling. And now we can see that the picture has transferred over once. Okay. So now I've done that particular section, right? And when I'm doing that particular section, oh, I noticed something that I forgot. I didn't go over my little guide marks, the 3 closed marks and the 3 open marks over here. There we go. So now I can see them on my paper. Okay. Now, just like with option number 1, I need closed dots next to closed dots and open dots next to open dots. Well, here is the first box that I did. So now I'm going to turn this and look, if I have the line side up, so the scribble side is down now, so it's opposite of what I had here, the 3 dots are lining up with the 3 dots here, and that's exactly what I want. So I'm going to line this up here. The pencil drawing is up and the scribbles are down against my final paper here. Again, I want to hold it really firmly, but this time I'm tracing. Whenever I see the drawing up, I'm tracing. Whenever I see the scribble side up, I'm scribbling. Okay, so you're doing like thing. What you don't want to do here is start scribbling on this side ever, because then you've just gotten rid of your image altogether. You don't have it anymore. You scribbled over the entire thing. Okay, so I'm going to start tracing, and because I scribbled on the other side, there should be plenty of graphite that by tracing here, I'm putting pressure on that graphite. And I'm going to go over the entire tree tracing it. All right, so I have 2 more sections to do on this particular one. What I'm going to do now is, again, I always want my open circles next to my open circles, my closed circles next to my closed circles. I always want to make sure on the side that is the drawing that I'm tracing and the side that's scribbling, I'm scribbling. So the next section, okay, I'm going to go and try to do down here. If I put it face up so that I would be tracing, that gives me closed dots next to open dots, which is not what I want. So that tells me that I need to flip this. So it's going to be scribbling. So scribbling was across from scribbling, and tracing is going to be across from tracing. That's kind of how it works out. You can do more than 4 sections for sure. You can do endless amounts of sections, really. But then you're going to be doing this over and over, and it's really, really important to make sure that you're flipping, and stuff like that. So now I'm making sure that the scribble side is up. I can double check that the open circles are next to the open circles here. And I'm going to scribble again because scribble side is up. I'm I'm relatively happy with that. It's a little lighter than I would want it to be, but I am trying to speed through these a little bit. So I have one more section that I need to do. You can see that they're all fairly light there. So the last one, again, okay, I need to make sure that I'm matching up dots to dots and open circles to open circles. So if I just put the drawing side up again, it might be hard to see on the camera, but this is open dot to open dot, and this is closed dot to closed dot, so that I know that it's the right way. I'm going to line it up. The last thing that I'm going to be doing here is tracing again, because the drawing side is up. So here I have to be a little bit more meticulous when tracing. All right, so I have my completed design for option number 3. You can kind of see where some areas don't line up perfectly. So I may go back and just lightly try to make sure that those spots, because they're really going to be the spots that people notice when they're looking at it, because that's where things are touching. So I'll make those a little bit neater, but otherwise I have my entire drawing. It's a little bit light. It's a little bit smeared in some areas. Goodness knows my hands are covered with graphite now, but I do have a radial design. So regardless of which way you do it, whether you do it with the window, whether you do it by using it essentially like tracing paper, regardless of what color paper you're using, it doesn't matter size, rectangle. There's several different ways that you can get radial designs. So hopefully that helped you with your project.